In today's episode, Kenya's government, fresh off a tax debacle, is now backpedaling on a pay hike for its well-paid officials. Meanwhile, in Uganda, political accusations of corruption and recreational substance use. Over in Zimbabwe, Mnangagwa faces trust issues about his term limits. Oh, and let's not forget the UK's dramatic political shuffle. Get comfortable before we make you uncomfortable. This is Second Take.
Entries are now open for the Republican Bridal Couple of the Year competition. Couples married between 1 March and 31 May 2024 have until 31 July of this year to enter the first round of the Republican Bridal Couple of the Year competition. One of the top 10 couples will be chosen from this pool to participate in the final, taking place in May 2025. To better your chance of reaching the final, enter now. To enter, simply WhatsApp #Bridal2025 to 085 785 6231 and follow the on-screen instructions or scan this QR code.
So, just days after being shamed into ditching a wildly unpopular financial bill that would have raised taxes, Kenya's government is now backpedaling on another tone-deaf proposal, a pay hike for its already well-paid cabinet and parliament members. President William Ruto, with a sudden flash of awareness, has ordered a review of the proposed salary increases following public outrage, proving that for once he can read a room. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission chairperson has now announced that these salary hikes will be frozen in light of the current realities of the economy. Now, the realities they only just noticed after the public had to take to the streets to point them out. Originally, the SRC had recommended a cushy 2 to 5% pay bump for all state officials, including judges. This sparked backlash as citizens already grappling with skyrocketing living costs questioned the logic of boosting politicians' salaries amidst a purported financial crisis. Understandably, President Ruto, seemingly surprised by the obvious, dropped the tax hike plans after protesters made it clear they couldn't afford any more financial strain. It took public uproar for the government to realize that raising their own salaries while citizens suffer from an economic downturn might not give the best look. The wake-up call for William Ruto and his government has been louder than the Boeing 737-700 business jet that President Ruto chartered for his trip to the US, which cost taxpayers close to 200 million shillings. Look, gone are the days when accountability was merely a suggestion for the old guard. Young people woke up to an Africa that looked nothing like what their parents were promised. From their understanding, everyone has their own shift to complete. There was a time when youth had to rise up against oppression because they knew that with their energy, that was the best time to show up. The same youth became adults that lived in an economy that allowed them to, buy a house. So to the modern youth that can't afford one, bad economic decisions aren't just a reflection of the disparity between the classes due to the replication of the colonial system by folks that were meant to abolish it. It means that the youth of the past are working far beyond their allocated shift, and the youth of today just want jobs and enough data to TikTok. It's a short list, but if those boxes aren't ticked, the kids that can't buy houses will meet you in the streets. In Uganda, the Commissioner of Parliament and former leader of the opposition in the House, Matthias Mpuuga, had some choice words for his party and its leadership. In a strongly worded speech at an event in Mitiana district, Mpuuga made remarks that are widely interpreted as a direct attack on the National Unity Platform leadership, particularly its president Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, aka Bobby Wine. Mpuuga asserted that drunkards and marijuana smokers are incapable of ousting President Yoweri Museveni from power. Tell those aspiring for leadership positions to stop spending time in bars, quit boozing and give up smoking marijuana, he said. Now, Mpuuga pointed out that Museveni, Uganda's longest-serving leader, whom he is determined to see removed from the office, by the way, remains consistently sober, unlike his own party president, Bobi Wine. Before entering politics, Bobi Wine was known as a marijuana smoker during his music career. Shock and surprise, a musician once smoked weed. Politicians aren't exactly known for having clean reputations. For example, I doubt that when Museveni started out, he promised to stay in power for 4 decades, yet here we are because people change. What is interesting is that Mpuuga's remarks can be seen as a counterattack against the NUP, which accused Mpuuga of corruption after he received an illegal service award amounting to 500 million shillings during his tenure as leader of the opposition in parliament. So Mpuuga has issues with robust recreational activities, yet he has no issues with a politician with power and authority and responsibility to the people of Uganda who steals millions. If Mpuuga asked the Ugandan people what they prefer, I have no doubt they would ask him to smoke some marijuana and chill out, because when he is sober, money goes missing. Zimbabwe President Emmerson Mnangagwa has tried to allay widespread fears that he wants to extend his presidency beyond the constitutionally permissible 2-term limit and stay in power beyond 2028. In recent months, there have been growing sentiments that Mnangagwa, who ascended to power through a 2017 coup, wanted to amend the country's constitution to remove the term limit. Alternatively, he could seek consent from Parliament to deharmonize elections and defer presidential ones to 2030. Contrary to public perception, the 81-year-old ZANU-PF leader hinted he will retire in 2028 upon the expiry of his second and final 5-year presidential term. But let's talk about this public perception, because that matters. It matters when your people are afraid that you could violate or change the constitution, especially when you consider yourself democratically elected. It says that the people do not trust their leader. It says that the people are aware that the reason you had a military coup to bring you into power was because Mugabe was not going to hand over the reins, and not because you felt that a man that had ruled for 38 years with you by his side was too old, a man that managed to consolidate power using your might. It is one thing to seek to allay fears. It is another to use it as an opportunity to review your political legacy. Because if you are a father and your children ask you if you will come home in a drunk state hurling insults at them again, it's not enough to say that you won't do it tonight. It's an opportunity to review the nature of your impact on your family. If it is true that Mnangagwa will let go of the reins, it may very well be the first time he can consider himself a better leader than Mugabe. Sometimes leaving is the best way for you to lead your nation, for your nation to move forward. And should that happen, as the Constitution requires, many Zimbabweans that have been disenfranchised by their own home can muster up the energy to proudly, finally, call you their president.
Irongomed is a leading distributor working in partnership with NewMed and WestMed to meet the comprehensive needs of the Namibian healthcare sector. As a partner pursuing sustainable global healthcare, we offer industry-leading medical solutions through our key focus areas, which include pharmaceuticals, orthopedics, ophthalmology, surgical devices and capital equipment, as well as a well-established scientific laboratory division. In healthcare, Irongomed is committed to making a difference. What about you?
The Namibian political scene seems to be bustling here and there. Yeah, here and there. All we know is that we have an election in November. So I sat down with Algeto Greg and we broke down Namibia's political landscape, asking the question, are they doing enough? Namibia also has an election, an important election, a pivotal election after the passing of Dr. Hage Geingob. Of course, he wasn't going to be running, but that did leave presumed power vacuum, because you've always kind of known how it's going to go, and it's not feeling like that. But I also feel like a huge reason it doesn't feel like that is I don't feel the campaigns.
Yes, that's something that is definitely missing. And even the issues which would be the center of campaigns, they are not being brought center stage.
Yes.
You know, you have, I read in today's paper, politicians in Parliament are going to be discussing the proliferation of international music on radio stations, which is nothing. It's not an issue. It's a non-issue.
That's not the thing we're discussing. And of course, peace and love to all Namibian artists. Absolutely priority to make sure that local music is played on radio stations. Yeah. But we can handle that.
Yes.
I think we've got huge pressing issues that we have not been able to handle for time after time after time. I mean, housing crisis. We don't even know how to start over there. It doesn't feel like people have the clarity they need, the people outside with regards to green hydrogen.
The housing crisis, you know, there was a presentation made to Parliament on Monday. Yeah, and where the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, they gave figures for how many houses have been built and how many urban have been serviced over the last 7-8 years.
Yes.
It's about 15,100 houses. Yeah. But we're in a backlog of 300,000 houses. So you build 15,000 houses over the last 7 years. The backlog has been increasing. The situation is getting more and more dire, you know, but your attention
and Parliament is whether or not to listen to Kendrick Lamar or Gaza. That's what you're dealing with.
Last weekend, there was a protest march organized by Basic Income Grant Coalition.
Absolutely. Yes.
And lots of young people participated in that march.
A golden opportunity.
You know, the youth vote is so important.
They believe the millennials, the youth, are the majority of the voters.
They are the majority of the voters. Yeah. And currently we are struggling to convince them just to go register to vote.
Absolutely.
Which any party which is serious about winning should be at the forefront of that push to get young people to register to vote.
Did any politicians co-sign the basic income grant?
None of the political parties publicly have said that they support the push for basic income grant. You know, I called PDM's McHenry Vernani. He said that he doesn't support something that's for everybody. You can't be giving millionaires money, he says. And that's why he says that if they come into power, they'll look at youth unemployment grant. You know, they want to target their assistance. And even IPC, I spoke to Ims Mashandi, he said that it's they want to do something better. They support the idea that something needs to be done. Too many Namibians are suffering, but they say that they'll reveal to us on 28 August what their plan is.
Yeah. Very interestingly, because
LPM did say that they did a study about it 2 years ago, and in principle they back it, but they haven't publicly said so, because when the first people I contacted were the coalition and asked them, now who's backing you? Yeah. And they say, now nobody, nothing. There's no interest from the political parties to support that cause. But it's just an example of, I think, a disconnect between the political parties and the political leadership in Namibia and the realities that Namibians face.
So it's a classic case of political ambitions versus actually servicing the community and what the community needs. And look, I hear things like, okay, you don't also want to give millionaires $500. I mean, I assume basic income grant, the idea is this is the right to dignity for everybody.
No, actually the basic income grant comes from the NAM Tax Consortium, which was a group of tax experts brought together by government in 2002 and tasked to figure out a way to broaden and deepen the tax base. We've got a problem that too few Namibians pay tax, and we're not generating enough tax so that the government doesn't have the money to do all the things, build the hospitals and all the things that we need done. That's what they say. That's what they said then already. And the NAM Tax Consortium took 6 months to study, and they came back to Parliament and said, we figured out the problem. The problem is that too many Namibians don't spend any money in any given month. Taxes comes from money spent.
Yes.
If money is not spent, there can be no taxes.
Yes.
So they said the solution is to give everybody just a little bit of money. Just a little bit of money. They weren't talking about improving your life or your welfare or whatever you're going to spend it on. These were tax experts. They were just talking about the economy.
Yes.
Right? What you're going to do when you get that money is you're going to spend it. When you spend it, it has a multiplier effect in the economy.
Yeah.
You might spend it at the shop.
Yes.
That shopkeeper goes to his supplier and spends it there.
Yes.
The supplier goes to the manufacturer and spends it there.
Yes.
The manufacturer pays his workers and he buys his material. He goes to wherever they buys the material and spends it there. And as it goes through the economy and gets spent, every time that it is spent, it generates taxes.
Yes.
So
that broaden that base.
That was the idea initially.
Okay.
And the politicians said no for 3 reasons. One, they didn't agree with anything for everybody.
Okay.
You must remember that we still come out of apartheid. We had a system where some get and some don't get. And there is still that feeling that we can't be giving people, again, we need to see who gets and who doesn't get.
Okay.
Right? The second reason they said was that it would make people lazy. Yeah.
Oh, and the old Republican.
And the third reason they said was because people would be irresponsible, they'd be drunkards, they'd just be spending
because
it
right
on
now
booze.
Namibia is on the lower part of alcohol consumption as it is.
In any case, after that, the Lutheran Church saw that this was a good idea because it would have a huge impact on social welfare as well.
Yes.
And they pulled together the Basic Income Grant Coalition of different social partners and all sorts of, even former President Hage Geingob at that time was a big proponent of the big.
Yes.
And they organized a pilot study to show that their argument is right and this other argument is wrong. In Omitara, they gave $100 to the residents, each resident of Omitara. I think it lasted for a year. And they recorded the results, which were incredible.
Wow.
It turned that whole town around.
Wow.
Yeah, it really worked.
So understandably, I mean, it would be disappointing to not see politicians fully take this on, or at least have a fully established voice or understanding of how they would want to tackle it. And let's swing it back to the politicians, because you also spoke about, the apartheid situation, which is true. And sometimes I think it is still reflective in the political sphere because the campaigning doesn't seem to happen outside of one's community for the most part. It's and no one is exempt from this. SWAPO for the most part will campaign at the north. Of course, they do have the government apparatus, so they can move around, inaugurate things.
There's a very interesting development happening right now, which has specific regard to that. You see, our constituencies are delineated and demarcated; they are drawn up. But every so often, there's an exercise where we adjust those borders. And we are currently in that exercise. And on Friday last week, the commission charged with heading this exercise rejected and called off a meeting because the communities had not been consulted by all the different constituency councillors about adjustments to these constituency borders.
Because gerrymandering is...
Now, you must understand that, say there's a specific ethnic group which dominates a specific area. If the border is drawn around that ethnic group and based on our historical trend in terms of voting, perhaps a specific party would have an advantage in that constituency. But if you change the borders to include perhaps a neighboring group, now the dynamics, the political dynamics of that constituency changes dramatically.
Which changes the priorities of the politicians campaigning.
Precisely. And the fact that people have not been able to give their inputs, whether they are disinterested or whether they are uninformed or whether they have not been approached, given the opportunity, it is very dangerous in terms of getting what you want at the end of the day out of the political system, because it affects how much your vote makes a difference. You know, each one of us should know in which constituency we stay, and how that constituency looks, and what the priorities are in that constituency. Because that's how you get your representative, whoever it is, to fight for those priorities, to make those changes that you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
and I'm also of the belief, though, however, moving away from party, just to the presidential aspect, that you're supposed to be in every corner of the country.
Yes.
It is impossible to want to lead one direction of the Namibia, whether it's north, south, east, or west. We need to see your presence in every part of the country. And time and time again, I mean, sometimes you see entire billboards going one direction of the country, and you will not see a single office of another party in a different part of the country. And time again now, I start asking myself, everybody seems to want to lead.
Yeah.
Who wants to represent all Namibians?
That is a good question.
And that is where we'll end our interview. Thank you very much, Algedo, for joining Second Take and making sure that we keep eye level of what's happening in the political world. Now, Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party lost to Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, initiating Labour rule for the first time in 14 years, leaving a legacy of a lengthy record of rule-breaking reflected in the UK falling to its lowest ever ranking in the Global Corruption Index. Yes, dodgy pandemic procurement contracts, party donors appointed to the House of Lords, and a sustained attack on its constitution, institutions, and rule of law. That is quite the CV to leave behind, not to mention the tiresome culture war crusades that have divided communities and polluted public life. In 14 years of power, Conservative leadership has had more turnovers than, boarding school bedding before inspection. David Cameron, everyone's favorite Margaret Thatcher impression Theresa May, the broke man's Donald Trump, Boris Johnson, the lady that served for less time than it takes to maintain her bob, Liz Truss, and the anti-immigration child of East African-born Hindu parents of Indian Punjabi descent, whose father was born in pre-colonial Kenya in 1949, while his mother was born in Tanzania. By the way, seeing as Rishi Sunak is moving out of 10 Downing Street, does that mean he should also be planning for a trip to Rwanda like the other migrants he planned to ship there? Or is it too soon for that Brexit? I wonder. As we know, a GNU has been freshly formed in South Africa, many opinions surrounding it, and the opinion that I am interested in is the one of TikTokers, and I love their interpretation of cutting that GNU cake.
Happy birthday to you.
Hip hip.
Hooray.
Hip hip.
Hooray.
Thank you so much, guys. It's such a pleasure to be a family with you guys. I would never have made it without you. Let's have some cabinet. Yeah, DA. Come, DA. Yeah. DA, come grab some piece of cabinet here. Woo, why this piece is too big? Let's not make it Godzilla now. We must eat this. Are you leaving the cake? That's what I thought. Come, are you free? So I've cut this in half. Go, come. Yeah, Pella, we must make sure when you're watching your weight. Yeah, do it for Sheng. Yeah. Oh, PA, our entertainment.
I'm so excited for this cabinet. It's got my head spinning.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so there's 3 of you. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Enjoy. Yeah. So who's next? Oh, Al Jamaa. Assalam, come. Don't worry, it's halal. So cool. My fellow South African. Okay. Oh, we have plus. Oh, come here. Okay, here we go. Have some, man. Here we go. Does the policy car? Vroom, 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 vroom. Does the policy car? Ah! Come on. We have plus. Come. Apartheid.
Ooh, what type of cabinet is this?
What cabinet are you talking about?
It's a cabinet. This one right here.
I don't see a cabinet.
What do you mean, the cabinet on the table?
Which table?
Are you okay? Are you?
No.
I'm looking.
Yes, the cabinet's finished. No, the cabinet's finished. There's nothing left. Fedile. Didu. Next. Klar.
So, it is clear that when politicians get too comfortable, the public won't hesitate to bring out the metaphorical pitchforks. From Kenya's pay hike fiasco to Uganda's political drama, Zimbabwe's constitutional concerns, and the UK's leadership carousel, remember, true leadership isn't about paychecks, but about serving the people. So, if you're ever in doubt, just ask yourself, are you leading for the perks or for the people? Are you worth a second take?